My name's David, and I've been married to Emma for nearly 15 years. We've had a good life together, or so I thought. We have two kids, Jamie and Lucy, who are the light of my life. Emma and I met in college, and our relationship has always been strong, built on mutual trust and understanding, or at least that's what I believed until a few months ago. It started with small things. Emma began to act differently, more distant and preoccupied. She used to be very open with her phone, leaving it around the house, but now it was always with her. Whenever I asked her about it, she would brush it off, saying she needed it for work. Emma's job at the marketing firm had never been particularly demanding, but suddenly she was staying late and going to client meetings more often than usual. One evening, while she was out, I noticed that her laptop was left open on the kitchen table. It was unusual because Emma was quite meticulous about her belongings. My curiosity got the better of me, and I took a peek at her screen. There were multiple emails from someone named Steve from work, and their tone seemed overly familiar. My gut told me something was off, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I tried to ignore the growing unease, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. But the signs kept piling up. Emma's late nights became more frequent, and our conversations grew shorter and more strained. The intimacy that once defined our marriage had all but vanished. I missed the little things, like our quiet evenings on the couch watching TV or the spontaneous weekend getaways we used to take. Now there was a palpable distance between us, and I didn't know how to bridge it. One night, while she was out working late, I decided to check her phone. I felt guilty, like I was betraying her trust. But I needed to know what was going on. I found nothing incriminating, just the usual messages and emails. But then I remembered something I'd read about phone tracking apps. I installed one on her phone, thinking it would give me peace of mind. For a few days, nothing unusual showed up. Emma's locations were consistent with what she had told me. But then, one Friday night, she said she was going to a client's dinner. The tracker showed her in a completely different part of town, at a residential address. My heart sank. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I needed more proof. The next week was torture. I watched her closely, noting every inconsistency, every little lie. I started to see the cracks in her stories, the subtle shifts in her demeanor when she talked about her day. My suspicions grew stronger, but I still hoped I was wrong. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to hire a private detective to follow Emma and gather evidence. It felt like a betrayal, but I needed to know the truth. The detective assured me he would be discreet and professional. I gave him Emma's schedule and the addresses from the tracker, and then I waited. The waiting was the worst part. Every day, I felt like I was on the brink of discovering something that would shatter my world. I tried to stay busy with work and the kids, but my mind kept drifting back to Emma and what she might be doing. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were filled with images of her with someone else. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the detective called me. He had found something. We arranged to meet at a small cafe where he handed me a folder. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing photos of Emma with another man. They were at a restaurant, holding hands and kissing. There were also pictures of them entering a hotel together. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was having an affair. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, trying to process what I had seen. The pain was unbearable, but I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront Emma and demand the truth. The next step would be the hardest, but it was one I needed to take. I kept the folder hidden away, unsure of how to approach Emma. The proof of her infidelity was like a ticking time bomb, and I felt its weight every moment. Our conversations became more strained as I struggled to keep my composure. Every time she smiled or laughed, a part of me broke inside, knowing it was all a facade. One evening, Emma came home later than usual. She looked flustered, and I could tell she had been drinking. She tried to act normal, but there was an edge to her demeanor that I hadn't seen before. I decided that night would be the night. I couldn't live in this limbo any longer. After the kids were asleep, I asked her to sit down at the kitchen table. The air was thick with tension as I pulled out the folder and placed it in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. "Open it," I replied, my tone colder than I intended. Emma hesitated, then slowly opened the folder. Her face went pale as she looked through the photos. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at the images, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. "Care to explain?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "David, it's not what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you've been cheating on me," I said, unable to keep the anger out of my voice. She started to cry, the tears flowing freely now. "I'm so sorry, David. I never meant for this to happen." "Then why did it?" I demanded, feeling a mix of fury and heartbreak. "How long has this been going on?" Emma took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "About a year," she admitted quietly. "It started as just a friendship, but it got out of hand." "A year?" I echoed, stunned by the revelation. "You've been lying to me for a year?" She nodded, wiping her tears. "I didn't want to hurt you. I was going to end it, but what?" I interrupted. "You couldn't? You didn't want to? What excuse do you have for betraying me like this?" Emma looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. "I felt so alone, David. You were always busy with work and we were growing apart. I didn't know how to fix it. And then Steve came along and he made me feel wanted." Her words cut deep, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook. "So, instead of talking to me, you decided to find comfort in another man's arms?" "It wasn't that simple," she whispered. "I know I should have talked to you, but I was scared. I didn't want to lose you, but I couldn't stop myself." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "Well, congratulations, Emma. You got what you wanted. You didn't lose me then, but you've lost me now." Her sobs grew louder as she tried to reach out to me. "Please, David, don't say that. We can fix this. I love you, and I don't want to lose our family." I backed away, shaking my head. "I don't know if we can fix this, Emma. You've broken my trust, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you." Her pleas grew more desperate. "David, please don't do this. I made a mistake, but I love you. I love our family." I felt a surge of anger, and my voice rose. "A mistake? You call a year-long affair a mistake? You've been lying to me, to our kids every day. How can I trust anything you say?" She tried to approach me, her hands outstretched, but I stepped back. "Don't!" I warned, my voice trembling with rage. "Don't come near me!" For a moment, we just stood there, the silence punctuated by her sobs. I knew what I had to do. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and final. Emma looked at me, bewildered. "What?" "I said, get out," I repeated. "Pack your things and leave. I can't stand to look at you right now." She started to protest, but I cut her off. "No more lies, Emma. Get your things and go. I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here." Her face crumpled as she realized I was serious. "David, please," she begged. "Don't do this. Think of the kids." "I am thinking of the kids," I snapped. "They don't deserve to live in a house full of lies and deceit. Get out, Emma, now!" She stumbled upstairs, her sobs echoing through the house. I followed her, watching as she hastily threw clothes into a suitcase. She kept glancing at me as if hoping I would change my mind, but I stood firm. When she was done, she looked at me one last time. "David, Just go," I interrupted, my voice breaking. "Please, just go." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked out the door. I watched her leave, feeling a mix of relief and devastation. The woman I had loved, the mother of my children, was gone. And with her, the life I thought I had. The house felt eerily quiet after she left. I sat down at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, trying to process everything that had happened. The pain was overwhelming, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let her betrayal destroy me. I had to be strong for Jamie and Lucy. They were my priority now, and I would do whatever it took to protect them. The next few days were a blur. I explained to the kids that their mom had to go away for a while, but I didn't go into details. They were confused and upset, and it broke my heart to see them like that. But I knew I had made the right decision. Emma had betrayed us all, and there was no going back. I knew the next step was confronting Steve. I needed to see the man who had come between us, to understand why this had happened. It was a confrontation I dreaded, but it was necessary. Only then could I begin to decide the future of my marriage and my family. The day after I kicked Emma out, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of her betrayal, and my anger grew with each passing hour. I needed to confront Steve, the man who had wrecked my marriage. I wanted answers, and I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me. I found Steve's address through a mutual friend who was unaware of the situation. As I drove to his house, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I replayed the scenes in my head, the photos, Emma's lies, her sobs as she packed her things. By the time I reached his house, my anger had reached a boiling point. I pounded on the door, each knock reverberating through my body. When Steve opened it, he looked surprised to see me. He was a tall, fit man, and the sight of him only fueled my rage. "David," he said, trying to sound casual. "What brings you here?" Without a word, I shoved the folder of photos into his chest. "Explain this," I demanded, my voice barely controlled. Steve glanced at the photos, his face paling as he realized what they were. "Look, man, it's not what you think. Not what I think," I exploded. "You've been screwing my wife for a year, and you have the nerve to say it's not what I think?" He stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I wasn't interested in his lies. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the doorframe. "You ruined my life, my family," I growled. "How could you do this?" Steve's eyes widened in fear. "David, please, let's talk about this." "Talk?" I spat. "I don't want to talk. I want you to feel the pain I feel, to understand the destruction you've caused." I let go of his collar and took a step back, my chest heaving with anger. "You stay away from Emma, from my family. If I ever see you near us again, I swear to God I'll make you regret it." Steve nodded, his hands shaking. "I promise, David. I'll stay away." I turned and walked away, my rage still simmering. Confronting him had given me a small sense of satisfaction, but it didn't erase the pain. As I drove home, I realized that my next battle would be with Emma. I couldn't let her off the hook so easily. She had to face the consequences of her actions, just like Steve. When I got home, I called Emma. She answered on the first ring, her voice trembling. "David, please, can we talk?" "Meet me at the house," I said, my tone cold. "We need to discuss our next steps." When she arrived, I didn't invite her inside. Instead, we stood on the porch, the air thick with tension. "David, I'm so sorry," she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Emma. You destroyed our family, and now you need to face the consequences." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know I messed up, but please, can we work through this? For the kids' sake?" I shook my head. "The kids deserve better than a home built on lies. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to fight for full custody." Emma's face crumpled. "David, no, please. I love you. I don't want to lose our family." "You should have thought of that before you cheated," I said, my voice hard. "You brought this on yourself." She sobbed, her shoulders shaking with the force of her cries. "I can't lose you, David. I'll do anything to make this right." "There's nothing you can do," I replied. "The damage is done. Now pack your things and leave. You can stay with your parents or a friend, but you're not welcome here anymore." Emma looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, David, just give me a chance." I felt a pang of sadness, but I knew I couldn't let her stay. "Go, Emma. For once, do the right thing." She nodded, her tears flowing freely, and walked away. I watched her leave, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. The woman I had loved for so many years was gone, replaced by a stranger who had shattered my trust. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. I met with a lawyer to start the divorce process and to fight for custody of Jamie and Lucy. The pain of Emma's betrayal was still raw, but I knew I had to stay strong for my kids. I also took steps to protect myself financially. I closed joint accounts and changed the locks on the house. I wasn't going to let Emma or Steve take anything more from me. One day, as I was sorting through our financial records, I found more evidence of Emma's deceit. There were receipts for expensive dinners and hotel stays, all charged to our joint credit card. Each one was a reminder of her betrayal, and my anger flared anew. I decided to confront Emma one last time. I called her and told her to meet me at a coffee shop. When she arrived, she looked tired and defeated. "David, what do you want?" I handed her the receipts. "Explain these." Her face flushed with shame. "I was trying to keep things normal for the kids," she said weakly. Normal? I scoffed. Spending our money on your affair while I was working to support our family? That's your idea of normal? She bowed her head, unable to meet my gaze. I'm sorry, David. I really am. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said. I want you to understand the gravity of what you've done. You've destroyed our family, our trust, and our future. Emma looked up, her eyes filled with regret. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Don't bother, I replied. It's too late for that. From now on, my only priority is our kids, and I'll make sure they know who you really are. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a sense of finality. The chapter of my life with Emma was over, and it was time to move on. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was determined to rebuild my life and protect my children from the fallout of her betrayal. I spent the next few months focusing on Jamie and Lucy, trying to give them a sense of stability amidst the chaos. We talked about the changes in our lives, and I reassured them that no matter what happened, I would always be there for them. They were my anchor, and their well-being was my top priority. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings dragged on. Emma fought for joint custody, but I was relentless in my pursuit of full custody. I couldn't trust her to put the kids' needs above her own, and I was determined to protect them from any further harm. One day, I received a call from my lawyer. David, we have a court date for the custody hearing, she said. I think we have a strong case, but we need to be prepared for anything Emma might throw at us. I thanked her and hung up, feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. The custody battle would be the final test of my strength and determination. I couldn't afford to lose, not when my children's future was at stake. On the day of the hearing, I stood in front of the judge, laying out my case. I spoke about Emma's infidelity, her neglect of our family, and my commitment to providing a stable and loving home for Jamie and Lucy. My lawyer presented the evidence we had gathered, and I watched as Emma squirmed in her seat. When it was her turn to speak, Emma tried to paint herself as a devoted mother who had made a mistake. She pleaded for joint custody, insisting that the kids needed both parents in their lives. But I could see the cracks in her facade, the desperation in her eyes. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally rendered his decision. Based on the evidence presented and the best interests of the children, I'm awarding full custody to Mr. David, he said. Mrs. Emma will have supervised visitation rights. I felt a surge of relief and triumph. I had won, and my children were safe. Emma looked devastated, but I didn't feel any sympathy. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The battle was over, and I could finally start to rebuild my life. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them head on. For the sake of my children, I would be strong. I spent the next few months focusing on Jamie and Lucy, creating new routines and memories. We took trips to the park, had movie nights, and enjoyed simple moments together. Slowly but surely, we began to heal. Emma's visits were tense at first, but I remained cordial for the kids' sake. Over time, she seemed to accept her new role and tried to make the most of her limited time with them. It wasn't easy, but it was the best solution for everyone involved. Through it all, I learned to lean on my friends and family for support. They helped me through the darkest days and reminded me that I wasn't alone. I also sought therapy to deal with my anger and pain, learning to let go of the past and focus on the future. One evening, as I tucked Jamie and Lucy into bed, I felt a sense of peace. Our lives had changed drastically, but we were stronger for it. We had faced betrayal and heartache, but we had come out the other side, ready to build a new future together. As I sat in the quiet of the house, I realized that despite everything, I had found a sense of closure. Emma's betrayal had shattered our family, but it had also revealed my own strength and resilience. I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I was ready to face it with my children by my side. The months following the custody battle were a whirlwind of change and adjustment. The initial relief of winning full custody gave way to the practical realities of single parenting. Jamie and Lucy needed stability and routine, and I was determined to provide it for them. We settled into a rhythm, slowly building a new life out of the ruins of the old one evening. As I sat with Jamie and Lucy during dinner, I noticed how much they had grown, not just physically, but emotionally. They were resilient, stronger than I had given them credit for. Their laughter, once a rare sound in our house, now filled the rooms with warmth and joy. We had come a long way, and it felt like the worst was behind us. As time went on, I started to think about the future in a way that I hadn't dared to before. The wounds from Emma's betrayal were still there, but they were healing. I was ready to move forward, to open my heart again. It was a daunting prospect, but I knew it was the next step in our journey. One weekend, my sister, who had been a pillar of support throughout the ordeal, invited me to a barbecue at her house. "It's time you got out and enjoyed yourself," she insisted. "You deserve a break." I agreed, realizing she was right. At the barbecue, surrounded by family and friends, I felt a sense of normalcy that I hadn't experienced in a long time. There was one person in particular who caught my eye. Her name was Anna. She was a friend of my sister's, and we struck up a conversation that flowed easily, filled with laughter and shared stories. Over the next few weeks, Anna and I started seeing each other more often. She was kind, understanding, and patient. She knew about my past and didn't shy away from it. Instead, she supported me as I navigated my new life. Our relationship grew slowly, built on trust and mutual respect. Introducing Anna to Jamie and Lucy was a big step, but I wanted them to see that life could be happy and full again. To my relief, they took to her immediately. Anna had a natural way with them, and soon it felt like she had always been a part of our lives. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Anna and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "You've come a long way, David," she said softly, her hand resting on mine. "I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that had been missing for so long. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, squeezing her hand. "Thank you for being here, for everything." Life began to take on a new rhythm. With Anna's support, I felt more confident and at peace. We took family trips, explored new hobbies, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of everyday life. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined us. One day, I received a call from Emma. She wanted to talk, and I agreed to meet her. It had been a while since we had a serious conversation, and I was curious to see where she stood. We met at a park, a neutral ground where we could talk openly. "David, I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice tentative. "I've started therapy, and I'm trying to understand why I did what I did." I listened, my emotions mixed. Part of me was still angry, but another part felt a sense of closure. "That's good, Emma. I'm glad you're seeking help." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be a better mother to Jamie and Lucy. They deserve that." I sighed, feeling the weight of the conversation. They do, and they need you in their lives. But trust is something that takes time to rebuild. "I understand," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I just want you to know that I'm committed to being there for them, however you see fit." We talked for a while longer, setting boundaries and discussing the future. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same page, working towards the same goal, the well-being of our children. As I drove home, I felt a sense of calm. The storm had passed, and we were all finding our way forward. I pulled into the driveway and saw Jamie and Lucy playing in the yard, their laughter echoing through the air. Anna stood nearby, smiling as she watched them. I joined them, feeling a sense of contentment that I hadn't felt in a long time. Life was far from perfect, but it was ours, and we were making the best of it. I had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a future that honored it and grew from it. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over our home, I felt hopeful. The road ahead would have its challenges, but we were ready to face them together. We had survived the worst, and now it was time to thrive. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to dream of the future. I envisioned a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. With Jamie and Lucy by my side, and Anna's hand in mine, I knew that no matter what came our way, we would face it together. In the end, Emma's betrayal had shattered my world, but it had also revealed a strength within me that I never knew existed. It taught me the value of trust, the importance of resilience, and the power of love. As we stood on the cusp of a new beginning, I felt a deep gratitude for the journey that had brought us here, and an unwavering belief in the brighter days ahead.